All right, here we are. We are live. We have been golden. We're checking, see how it's. Boom, 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 boom. Yeah, y'all are watching the beginning works of everything. All right. So, in this last video that we had just done, that got interrupted, had technical difficulties. It was how Saddam lost the war to Ayatollah Khamenei. I don't even want to say the name wrong. But we're learning about the Iran-Iraq war. This is a documentary. It's only 21 minutes, so that's not that long to kind of get a little bit of information and get a little understanding of why the U.S. has gone into war in Iraq. Well, I mean, we kind of already know why we went into war with Iraq, but we don't necessarily fully know how the Iraqi people are. We know what we're told by the media and by what we see in printings or papers and history itself. But here we actually get to dive into it, and that's what I want to start having us do, is diving down into information so we know who people are of different nations, so you can know how their mindset is and how they operate, because this right here gives you an avenue to show you how they operate and they live as a society within their own culture and their own ways and how they do things, because we all do things in a unique way. We're all created differently with a perfect imperfection. So that's how I look at it. So first one, of course, is the intro, and then it's lead up to war, and then Iraq invades Iran. The war moves to Iraqi soil and unlikely friends, and then total war and stalemate. So that's pretty interesting. So let's dive into it and let's see what they are all about. In 3, 2, 1, go.
In 1980, war broke out between the Middle East's two preeminent powers, Iran and Iraq. Both countries were ruled at the time by leaders that recently came to power. Iraq's long-serving vice president Saddam Hussein had assumed the presidency the year before, whilst Iran had just emerged from the throes of a revolution that culminated in Ayatollah Khomeini becoming the supreme leader. Starting with an invasion of Iran, the war soon moved into Iraqi soil, before devolving into a deadly stalemate that cost the lives of hundreds of thousands.
Alright, so I'm going to get myself off of here just so we can see everything within the writing, so my picture can be just kind of out of it, but I will be here. And whenever I come to talk about stuff, I will jump myself back on here and we will go from there. So y'all enjoy.
Of soldiers on both sides. The conflict would prove to be one of the deadliest of the 20th century, with chemical weapons being used, as well as World War I style trench warfare. The two combatants fought a war for the very existence of their regimes, so it is no surprise that both sides made deals with countries they deemed their enemies. All the while, the international community watched with bated breath as the Persian Gulf, the home of much of the world's supply of oil, became engulfed in war.
When we started Warby Parker, we just sold glasses, and only online. But people
In the 1970s, Iran was a modernizing nation on the rise. Its huge oil reserves brought an influx of cash which was then used to rapidly develop the country. Its longtime ruler, Mohammad Reza Shah, wanted Iran to recapture its past glory after seeing it be at the prey of European imperial powers for over a century. So he quickly sought to modernize the country's military. Spending billions of dollars, the Shah bought advanced weaponry and equipment from countries like the USA and UK. With its vast array of tanks, state-of-the-art fighter jets, and impressive warships, Iran was well on its way to becoming one of the world's most powerful military forces. Regionally, it became the preeminent power in the Middle East, thanks to its GDP and military. But beneath this picturesque surface, the country faced serious fundamental issues. Despite the massive windfall from oil, Iran's newfound wealth was only available to a select class as a result of the rampant nepotism that plagued the government. Those who were favored by the regime received lucrative contracts and positions facilitated by the oil boom. At the same time, the traditional forces within society were alienated by the Shah's ardent support for Iran's westernization. In 1978, tensions boiled over as huge protests, led by the ulama, started gathering momentum. From his exile, Ayatollah Khomeini soon emerged as the leader of the anti-regime movement. In a remarkable sequence of events, the Shah stepped down at the beginning of 1979, being replaced by Khomeini. The new supreme leader of Iran announced that the country was to be a theocracy, ruled by the ulama itself. For neighboring Iraq, 1979 was also a momentous year. Saddam Hussein, having already been the de facto ruler of the country for some years, officially became president. Just 2 weeks later, in July 1979, he publicly purged his Ba'athist party to assert dominance on the Iraqi political scene. In his capacity as vice president, Saddam had presided over Iraq's remarkable growth in the 1970s. In many ways, this progress mirrored the same that was experienced by Iran in this time period. In 1972, the Iraqi Petroleum Company was nationalized under the supervision of Saddam. A year later, both Iran and Iraq benefited hugely from the OPEC oil embargo, which saw the price of oil triple within a year. Subsequently, Saddam used the increased oil revenues to develop his country by building roads, schools, and hospitals. To go hand in hand with all this material growth, Saddam sought to assert his will on all of Iraqi society, leading him to invest heavily in his secret police. Similar to the Shah of Iran, Saddam also signed a series of arms deals with foreign countries to modernize his military, buying the latest tanks, fighter jets, and attack helicopters from countries like France and the USSR. As his emerging neighbor Iran was plunged into revolutionary frenzy, Saddam would watch with keen
France
interest.
and the USSR.
He, like much of the ruling elite, was Sunni Muslim. Despite being excluded from the halls of power, Shia Muslims actually held a demographic majority. Therefore, the ascension of the Ayatollahs to power in Iran particularly worried Saddam about the prospect of his own Shia Iraqis rising up against him, especially since Khomeini championed the exportation of his revolutionary ideals abroad. The roots of the danger lay in Iraq's demographics. Despite being ruled by an entrenched Sunni minority, Iraq's population was predominantly Shia. For years, the Shia had been excluded from the halls of power, and they harbored bitter resentments about the discrimination they endured under the Sunni tribal elite. The Iraqi leader took this threat to his survival very seriously. In addition, the two countries had a long-standing feud over the Shatt al-Arab waterway at the mouth of the Persian Gulf. In 1975, Saddam had personally been involved in the Algiers Agreement, which saw Iraq concede its right to the waterway to the Shah. But he had signed this largely to put an end to the Kurdish rebellion within Iraq, which was sustained by Iranian support for the Kurds. Iran's new government may have been crackling with revolutionary zeal, but militarily they were weak. Saddam saw his opportunity to strangle the Ayatollah's threatening vision in its crib. As a result, on September 22, 1980, squadrons of Iraqi fighters swarmed into Iranian airspace and attacked a collection of bases near Tehran. The Iran-Iraq War had begun. Saddam had envisioned his air attack would have the same effect as the Israeli strikes did in the Six-Day War of 1967. Upon securing aerial superiority, he believed Iraqi victory would be swift and inevitable. Unfortunately for him, this did not materialize. The aerial attack was unsuccessful, only doing partial damage to the air bases and destroying an insignificant number of aircraft. Nevertheless, Saddam launched a ground invasion the very next day, attacking in 3 locations in the north, center, and south. Much of the Iraqi manpower was dedicated to the southern attack, which targeted Iran's Arab-dominated Khuzestan province, in the process fully securing the Shat al-Arab. Almost immediately, the Khuzestani cities of Khorramshahr and Abadan were besieged. Both sieges would be protracted and delayed the Iraqi offensive, thus giving Iran sufficient time to stabilize and calculate its strategy. Although Khorramshahr would be captured by the end of October, the Iraqi offensive was seriously delayed by outnumbered Iranian units who fought tooth and nail to defend the city. Abadan, the site of the famous refinery, took even longer, with the siege being dragged out until September 1981 and ending in an Iranian victory. Right from the get-go, Saddam was surprised by the Iranian response. Considering the political turbulence the country had experienced in the previous few years, he had almost assumed Iran would wither from the pressure of an external attack and internal upheaval from ordinary Iranians. Instead, what he found was a disjointed nation that was galvanized by a foreign aggressor. Domestically, Ayatollah Khomeini was facing serious threats from all directions. The MEK were launching attacks on high-ranking members of the regime. Even amongst the ulama, there was dissension with Khomeini's strict vision.
So even
Segments of
Saddam
Iranian
had
society itself was becoming
issues
alienated with the Islamic
him.
Republic as it slowly realized it had replaced one dictator in the Shah with another in Khomeini. But rather than capitulating, Ayatollah Khomeini saw an opportunity to secure his Islamic revolution. The military investments made by the Shah in the previous few decades meant that the country still retained fairly sophisticated weaponry. The Iranian response was decisive. In fact, just 2 hours after the initial Iraqi airstrike, Iranian fighter jets responded with their own attack. 2 months later, in November, Operation Morvarid prevented Iraqi dominance over the Persian Gulf and destroyed much of the Iraqi navy. This meant Iraq could not entirely blockade the port of Abadan, allowing Iran to resupply it by sea and thereby directly contributing to the siege's eventual failure. From early 1981 onwards, Iraqi offensives essentially stalled.
War is not pretty.
In January of that year, it was Iran's turn to go on the offensive, launching Operation Nasr. The brainchild of President Bani Sadr, it was intended to drive the Iraqis out of Khuzestan. But internal turmoil within the new Iranian government meant that the operation would end up becoming a disastrous failure. Upon ascending to power, Khomeini had purged the military of officers whose loyalties he doubted. Countless senior officers were imprisoned, executed, or fled abroad. At the same time, he had established the Sepah-e Pastaran, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, to ensure the protection of the Islamic Republic. This resulted in a rivalry between the army and the IRGC. To further confound matters, this rivalry took shape politically as the moderate President Bani Sadr supported the army, whilst more hardliner members of the government supported the Revolutionary Guards. So when Operation Nasr failed, it set off a chain of events within Iran. Bani Sadr's opponents were emboldened, soon after impeaching him in June 1981. Knowing firsthand what happened to those who fell afoul of the regime, Bani Sadr decided to flee the country. From this point on, Iran's government was unified under Islamist hardliners who would intensify their grip on power over the next few years by eliminating all rivals. From 1980 to 1983, the regime launched the Cultural Revolution, seeking to root out nonconformist thought amongst institutions of higher education. Universities were shut down for this period, students and teachers were purged. Dissident groups like the MEK would fight back by unleashing a wave of high-profile attacks on prominent figures of the regime. An attack on the Prime Minister's office in August 1981 left both the new president Rajai and Prime Minister Bahunar dead. Even the current supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, was the target of an assassination attempt a few months earlier in June 1981. The MEK would go on to collaborate with Saddam from 1983 onwards. This revolutionary crisis mode would come to pass by 1983, and it was to benefit Iran's war effort against Iraq. The rivalry between the army and the IRGC would also dissipate, thereby making coordinated attacks between the two branches of the military smoother.
The idea of channeling, it is a synchronization of frequencies that allow you to have the...
Already by May 1982, Saddam's forces had been driven out of Iranian land. At this point, Saddam's strategy changed from holding territory within Iran to not losing any within Iraq. Immediately, he tried to sue for peace. But Khomeini was uninterested, seeing the benefits the war had brought for his regime. The Iranians did, however, have a major problem on their hands. Ever since the hostage crisis of 1979, they had been facing severe international sanctions from the US and its allies. This meant replacing weapon parts was extremely difficult,
So we've
an
had
issue they
some
sought to
past
fix by
issues with
cannibalizing
Iran.
parts from other machinery and turning to the black market. To highlight the complexity of geopolitics, Israel became one of the biggest suppliers of arms to Iran during the war. The Israelis first got permission from the Americans for these arms sales, which totaled to tens of billions of dollars. When Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin launched
So
an attack
has
on Iraq's
Iran
Osirak
forgot
nuclear
that
reactor
Israel
in
helped them
1981, it was done with
during
Iranian
the
intelligence.
Iran-Iraq war?
So even though
What took
publicly
place?
the Ayatollahs maintained an antagonistic stance towards Israel, and despite America publicly supporting the sanctions on Iran, through backdoor means they did the opposite. The US also secretly sold arms to Iran. In 1986, the Iran-Contra affair came to light and shocked the world. Under the Reagan administration, America had been selling weapons to Iran and using the funds to finance the Nicaraguan Contras, right-wing rebels fighting against the Marxist Sandinista government. This was all the more embarrassing because of Operation Staunch in 1983, where the US tried to diplomatically...
See, so this is where I always have my issue now. And it's because I always hear this, every world war or every war that we've been in, we've gotten involved in, or we had no place to be in. Just like the Vietnam War. Like, we had no reason to go into Vietnam. Like JFK said, that's an unwinnable war. That's a war that will just bring a lot of bloodshed. And it did. And he was right. I don't think that we should have been in that war, especially whenever our soldiers come home and they get spit on and get called baby killers whenever they were going over there to go do their job. And you realize that in the Vietnam War, Vietnamese people were teaching kids how to hold up machine guns and say, this is who you shoot. So kids were taught and would have to be in the front lines, and that's sadistic. That's gross. So I see why he didn't want to be inside of that war. And then now you hear right here that Ronald Reagan was selling arms to Iran during the war, but also Israel was sending weapons to Iran during the war. But now here we are in 2025, and last year Iran attacked Israel, did the October 7th ordeal, and then you had June 13th with Israel shooting at Iran. And then they went back and forth. And then what happened? The U.S. got involved. History repeating itself. But instead of this time arming them, this time we destroyed something within them. And I don't know how they really truly feel about that. Like, I don't think anybody would feel good about getting missiles and, some pretty heavy stuff getting jumped up on all your hard work. But I mean, you gotta do what you gotta do, especially if the country that has it is proclaiming death, because we do not need to be proclaiming death. Death is not okay. Like, death is not right. For anyone to sit here and think that death is okay, it is not okay. Killing is not okay. Peace, love, unity, and respect is the best thing to do in life, because that makes everything in harmony. You get that, right? Okay, this is an analogy here. Let's say you're stranded on a boat and you have a choice of two islands. Like, you're traveling on this boat for like weeks and you're running low on your food. And in the distance, you see two islands. And one of the islands has a whole bunch of Christians. And the other one has barbarians and savages and killers and murderers. Which one do you want to go to? Do you want to go to the side that proclaims love and to love thy neighbor and try to walk in a best light that you can? Or do you want to go over where the savages are, to where you could possibly just lose your life? Or, I don't know, you murder somebody, you take somebody's life. You never know what's going to happen over there. It's an island of uncertainty. And then you have an island that gives you clarity, that gives you a purpose. What side do you want? And we have to look at that as how we see the world. Do we want to see the world and be in a world with a bunch of barbarians? Or do we want to be in a world with peaceful, loving people who know that even though we all come from different walks of life, we are here for a purpose and a reason. And we're supposed to be here to love one another, not hate one another, not take one another's life, not try to belittle, not try to downgrade, not try to say that this one cannot exist, but all the others can exist. That is not okay, because to do that, that's shaming on you. That's shaming on you. And that's an individual thing. That's not a holy thing. That is an individual issue. And I don't know the issue fully that's really gone on when it comes to Iran and Israel. And that's why I'm also digging down, trying to figure this stuff out. Because I want to know what went wrong. Because if you can figure out what went wrong, that's where you can fix it. But I don't think you're going to fix it with politicians and businessmen. I think you need a humanitarianism. A humanitarian. I think I'm saying it right. Humanitarian. And you need an independent. You don't need a conservative. You don't need a liberal. You don't need a Republican. And you don't need a Democrat. We've had enough of those. Soon enough, there will be an independent that walks into the United States of America. Already is in the United States of America. You know, bing, 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 bing. Nobody knows. People know. I've been talking about it for years, but I am running for president as the independent candidate in 2036. I'm putting my name in the ballot in 2032. My goal is to get at least 100,000 people to support me, and we rock from there. If I can get 100,000 people to say, yes, I would vote for you as a president, I have a fighting chance. Because I'm not fighting for corporations or business people. I'm fighting for everyday average Joe people like you, like me. I'm not rich. I'm not famous. I'm a poor guy. All right. I don't care if I ever get rich. I don't care if I ever get famous. I don't care if I become popular. I really don't. But what I do want to do and what I do want to be known for is the guy who really did try to fix the world and tried to fix the people and fix world peace. Because we can claim to have a world peace, but we can't have a world peace with suits and ties. Suits and ties will not ever bring world peace. And that maybe that's me making a stand against suit and ties, and maybe that is. Suit and ties are not going to bring world peace. It's people who dress like this. It's the people who dress like as they do in Israel or Syria or Iran or Iraq or Russia or Ukraine or China, Japan, Taiwan, Mexico, Canada, everywhere. Everyday average people that wear the regular clothes and don't try to look superficial, because to look superficial, you can be bought out. You're already bought out. I didn't expect to go into this kind of rant, but let's get back into this, because this kind of just boils me a little bit. You know, I knew that the U.S. had to be somewhat involved and had their fingers embedded into this, but it's just, why? Why do we keep involving ourselves into everything? And I mean, this was before my time, so I wasn't even around during this time.
Pressure other countries not to sell Iran arms. Besides these clandestine transactions, Iran mainly relied on China, Libya, and Syria.
So we're going to go back on that. I want to hear what they just said again.
Iran, and using the funds to finance the Nicaraguan Contras, right-wing rebels fighting against the Marxist Sandinista government. This was all the more embarrassing because of Operation Staunch in 1983, where the US tried to diplomatically pressure other countries not to sell Iran arms. Besides these clandestine transactions, Iran...
Okay, so they didn't want other countries to sell Iran arms because the US didn't want to lose their money funding into that. So they highly urged people not to sell weapons to Iran. But they were doing it and funding weapons. See, it's a monopoly. It's all a monopoly.
Iran mainly relied on China, Libya, and Syria for support in arms and logistical equipment. Iraq, on the other hand, received much more international support. Around the time that the war moved from Iranian to Iraqi soil, the oil-rich Gulf countries like Kuwait and Saudi Arabia started providing Saddam with massive loans, fearing Tehran's warlike and revolutionary regime would harm their own interests. Syria was one of the only Arab countries to stand behind Iran, shutting down the Kirkuk-Banias pipeline from 1982 onwards, resulting in a catastrophic loss of capital for Saddam, losing billions of dollars every month. But support from the Gulf countries prevented Iraq from bankruptcy, with some estimating Saudi loans alone to be $1 billion per month. In addition, Saddam also received a lot of support from the USSR and Western countries such as...
That's a lot of money to fund a country a month. Like, you know, I hear, talking about all these tariffs, about how much money, like, either we send out to other countries, like we pay other countries to ship our goods or to, take our goods, which, it's not that much, but, we take in a lot of countries' goods, and the money of it. Just talking about it as like it's nonchalantly, it's just like, yeah, we got $7 billion coming back from China. It's just like, what? $7 billion? Like, to get 7 billion, to even get from a million to a billion is ridiculous. Do you know how many millions you have to go through? You have to go through 999 million to get to your first billion. So how does billions just keep adding up? Like, that's ridiculous amount of money. That's I don't even know how the world got to that point of having that much money, that each nation just has all this money that there's like, yeah, here, right there. It just really makes it seem that money is just made up. And money was made as a currency for controlling of people. And now, I mean, this is why you got all cards on everything and you don't really get cash anymore. Because cards, you can control what goes on cards. You can stop cards. You can't stop the hand-to-hand transaction of paper money. You see? Look, no matter what, it goes, and I can still have it. The value doesn't change of the dollar. Who dictates the change of the dollar? The people who make the dollars and say it's time to lower the dollar. That's what we're doing right now. We're lowering the dollar. The dollar has gotten so low, and other countries know it, and that's why they've got all these things going on. And YouTube, I'm just here expressing what's in my thoughts and what's in my brains. There is a lot that goes on, and I know that y'all even know, like, the things that you guys have up on your platforms. They don't get taken down. They don't get censored. They don't get banned. They don't get shadow blocked like you did my first page. Now, you can't. Don't. You can't. Please don't. Because that just really shows that you're really picky and choosy. I'm a non-filter. So, I have no filter. I just start saying what I want. But I will be cautious on what I say, because I'm not here to be disrespectful to people at all. I'm here to give information. I'm here to show the information, and I'm here to show peace to the world and let the world know that the world can find peace. We just have to find the right individuals to create the peace, and not suits and ties. So let's finish this really fast, and then I'm going to have to get off and I have to get ready for bed. It's another early day for me tomorrow. But we will be back again tomorrow, and we will figure out a new different topic. I think this go around, we might actually jump into the history of the Soviet Union and figure out a little bit about the history of the Soviet Union. And then we're going to dig down into Iran and Israel's conflict of what's their story, because then maybe that will give me an idea of why Israel was funding Iran weapons back in the day, but now they're all at war. We're going to figure out. This is why we are doing this. So get ready, guys. I didn't think my 2025 year was going to be like this. I didn't think that this is what was really going to happen for my 2025 year. But when the Lord calls and says it's time for you to do what you got to do, you got to do what you got to do. Don't ignore the call. You answer the call, and you rock with it, and you slide. So let's go.
Was France and West Germany. In 1982, America normalized relations with Iraq and went on to provide the Iraqi dictator with military intelligence as well as selling arms to him. It was crucial for US interests in the Middle East for Iraq to not lose the war, because it would destabilize neighboring countries which had pro-American governments, not to mention the massive impact an Iranian victory would have on the oil industry.
So is this why they're talking about the rising of, and closing their oil ports so ships can't bring out the oil, and saying that we can have rising oil prices if we were to get into this war and conflict with Iran, because then they'll close the ports. They're a big part into our oil, but the United States has its own oil within it, so rich and great. Drill, baby, drill. That's what we've been talking about, right? Not me. I stand in the middle of everything, and I just let people do what they do. And there's some things that I want some people to hold up on, and drill, baby, drill is one of the things that I want to hold up on. I want to be held up on. Bring gas back down to $1.65. That's what I want. That would be great. So great. All right, I'm done. Let's get into this.
Iran's invasion of Iraq convinced Saddam that he had to pursue a policy of total war, gearing the entire society for Iraq's defense. So he drafted even more soldiers into both the regular Iraqi army and the Iraqi Popular Army, a paramilitary force consisting of civilian volunteers. At the start of the war, Iran held a clear manpower advantage, but by 1984, the forces were equal in numbers. Just 2 years later, Iraq's forces were significantly higher than their foe, and by the end of the war in 1988, Iraq's army numbered 1 million soldiers, perhaps more, whilst Iran had almost half that number. Saddam used this numerical advantage by employing a defense-in-depth strategy, creating multiple lines of defense that intended to bleed the Iranians through attrition. This was especially effective against the Iranian strategy of human wave attacks, whereby their infantry would try to overwhelm Iraqi defense lines with sheer numbers. Once parity in army sizes was reached, these attacks were favored less by the Iranian high command anyway. The Iranian objective was to break the Iraqi resolve to fight, but buoyed by funding and weapons from the West and the Gulf monarchies, Iraq remained resolute. Even when the Iranians teamed up with the Peshmerga, the Iraqi Kurdish resistance movement, to open up a new front in the north, the deadlock could not be broken. From 1982 until 1988, the conflict consisted of constant Iranian offensives that were rebuffed by a determined Iraqi defense. Unconventional warfare became normalized as the two sides settled into a World War I-like trench warfare. Both sides began targeting civilians, with their air forces attacking major cities from the opposing side in order to terrorize the civilian population.
So why do these leaders over here go for attacking civilians? That's where it's unconventional, as what he was saying, unconventional warfare. You start going and attacking the civilians, and that's where it's really where you got it, where war is dirty, and I don't agree with it at all, because that's you're putting innocent lives on the line. People that don't want to be a part of this, but we ultimately have to be a part of this because where we reside. So just because where we reside, we have to follow into with what our government, our leaders are going and doing. And if they say we have to go to war, it's not we. that are going to war. It's you that are going to war, and you're bringing in your troops. You're bringing in your army to go in at war with another nation that has his army. You're playing a strategic game of chess. You're playing a strategic game of war. That's all it is. Quit using us as your pawns. To use us as your pawns, and then you just, boom, okay, their lives didn't matter. But yet they say every one of our lives matter. But yet you use the unconditional warfare. Now, I'm not saying our people use unconditional warfare, because I think we've been somewhat genuine about it. I have issues when it came to the whole 9/11 and all that, but I mean, when I was in first grade, that's all I was growing up hearing about: war, 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 war. That's all I've known ever since I've been alive, is war, hearing about wars. So of course, that's all I'm gonna really, I'm gonna be sick of it. Having wars, people in my age growing up now are all sick of hearing it, except for the people that are actually in it. They might not even like being in it, and some of them might love being in it. But there's people out there that don't want to be in it, because it's human moral. But we also do stand by a code. And anyone who wants to go and do that and fight for your country, like, I applaud you, because that's scary. I wanted to do that, but I couldn't. I got an injury. I got body slammed on concrete back in 2013. I got my skull fractured in 2 layers. I got my tailbone cracked in 2 places. My meniscus got messed up. So I lost my opportunity. But that was a blessing in disguise, in a sense, because it gave me to not just see the enemy, what they say is the enemy, but you get to see who controls the forces, who controls the masses. And that's where I feel like I've been placed in a design placement to be here and watch it at this moment, and for these things to happen. Because ever since my injury, my whole life has changed. Everything about me has changed. My thought process, the way I want to talk with people, the way I kind of think about myself. I have a lot of, bad negative thoughts. Not even bad negative thoughts. That's really bad to say. I beat myself up a lot. I'm very insecure. And that's also because of what I've gone through in my life. I've gone through so much stuff that a lot of people wouldn't be able to handle this, what I've gone through. A lot of people would probably just go in the back and like, oh. It takes a lot every day for me waking up and knowing that I'm going to have a day of up here that wants to break me down, but here wants to lift me up. But it's a battle, everyday battle between these two. But all right, I'm done talking for right now. Let's get back into this.
From 1984 onwards, the two countries began targeting each other's ability to export oil in the Persian Gulf, as the global financial system watched nervously. By 1987, American warships intervened by escorting Kuwaiti tankers which were being attacked by the Iranians. Saddam also gave the green light for the use of chemical weapons, with his close relationship to the USA emboldening him to do so without fear of consequences. The most deadly usage of these came just before the war ended, when Saddam decided to address the Kurds living in the north. Accusing them of being a fifth column for collaborating with Iran, he unleashed a brutal campaign against them in 1987. The height of this operation was in March 1988 in the town of Halabja, where Iraqi planes dropped chemical munitions on defenseless inhabitants who could not outrun the roiling clouds of gas. In a single day, 5,000 men, women, and children were killed, 10,000 more were injured. Whilst it did earn him the ire of the international community, the Kurds were pacified for the time being.
Inhumane.
Saddam could now turn his attention back to the Iranian front. By 1988, Iran was exhausted, unable to keep up with Iraq and its powerful allies. By July of that year, Saddam's forces had reversed the small Iranian gains within the country. The key southern port city of Basra, which had been besieged multiple times, was now out of danger. Later that month, Khomeini begrudgingly accepted a ceasefire, and by August 1988, the war was over. Up to 1 million Iraqis and Iranians were dead, 700,000 were injured. Neither side gained any territory or anything else for that matter, but both sides lost a great deal. For Iran, whilst the war solidified the Ayatollah's grip on power, they had lost human capital as well as a tremendous amount of money, which was compounded by the heavy sanctions already placed on them from the international community. For Iraq, it had entered the war as a rapidly modernizing country that was the envy of most of its neighbors, but now found itself as yet another war-torn third world country. To make matters worse, the loans given to Iraq by its rich Gulf neighbors were going to be recalled, meaning that it was now going to face bankruptcy. Saddam's response to Kuwait asking for its money led to the Gulf War just 2 years later, at which point Iraq suffered the same fate as Iran, becoming an international pariah, as its erstwhile ally America turned on Saddam by vilifying him. Thank you guys for watching. As usual, thank you to my patrons for your continued support. Until next time, peace.
Peace. Peace be with.
The first one.
Alright, so that was Hike My History. We'll give them a subscribing follow. Yeah, that was very intense, especially the end of that, and going into unconditional warfare, dropping chemical weapons on civilians, women, children. 5,000 people lost their lives in that attack. 10,000 were injured. This is so messed up. You know, and this is why I talk about how there's evil people out here in this world, because that right there, to do something like that is, it's not kind, it's wicked, it's evil, it's malicious. That's why would you do that? And I know and this happened quite a few years before I was born. 1988 is when this war ended, and I was born in 94. And just within years, 9/11 happens, and it's like, here we go, and another one. So this totally makes sense about why we are in the conflicts that we are in right now, because of where we have been and where we have put our toes in. And it's not even being by the administration that we have currently. These are administrations that we had back in the day, like what? Because presidencies go by 4 years, but some got elected twice. So I'd say, what, this is about 6 presidents ago when this happened? 6 or 7? 6? Trump. I'll figure that out later. But you get what I'm saying here. You know, this wasn't that long whenever all this was happening. In 1988, over 5,000 women, children, and men lost their lives over a nonsense war. A war that shouldn't have happened. A war of two people not seeing eye to eye, where you could have just gone into a room, and that's what I think that, some world leaders should do. I think that you guys just need to go into a room. I think all the world leaders need to go in a room, and I think y'all need to have a boxing match and have tournaments to see who's the top G in the boxing match of the nations. Whenever y'all are stressed, don't send out your people. You send out your people when there is an international, like an actual rising threat of other people who are trying to. No, because that's just war. It's still war. I don't want war. War needs to be done. And one way you get war to be done is everybody dropping your weapons. But that's not going to happen. Not at all. Maybe one day. One day. I think there will come a time when everyone drops their weapons. And when we do that, I think the world really truly would get in a better harmonistic state. Until then, I don't think we're going to. Because the more tension that you bring into the world, the more energy of negativity and frustration and anger and sadness and sorrow and pity and destruction and chaos. That is what goes on with keeping your weapons. But to know that nobody has weapons will bring a sense of peace and clarity. And maybe even if still for some are not going to think of it as being helpful at all. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. Go punch a tree. You have many trees out here in this world. Punch a tree. Do something. We don't have to go and send our sons and daughters, our fathers, our mothers, our aunts and our uncles, our grandparents to fight in wars that we really truly don't have to do. Because each bit of blood shed on the earth is costing earthly pain. And soon enough, Mother Nature will outcry. And she already is. She's been outcrying for a while. That's why you see all these things about all these tsunamis or floods or hurricanes and the ocean rising up in its temperature. All these tornado outbreaks, earthquakes, volcano eruptions. Mother Nature is telling us that it is getting upset. It's getting tired of all this blood. This blood needs to stop because Mother Nature is telling us it needs to stop. And soon enough, if we do not stop, she will completely spew us. And then we'll have to restart. Maybe that needs to happen. I don't know. Can we make a change here? Can we change something in the world? I really hope we can. Before it's too late. Peace, love, harmony, serenity, and good graces. Peace.